Russia's invasion of Ukraine is like that one guest at a party who just won't leave. Ukrainian cities are getting bombarded left to right. Kyiv is basically playing dodgeball with missiles, and the bill for rebuilding the country just keeps getting higher. From financial woes to increased poverty, Ukraine is basically the poster child for when it rains, it pours. Through Russia's relentless attacks on Ukraine's energy and industrial infrastructure, as well as its cities and vital economic sites, the country has seen a devastating 33% drop in economic output in 2022, pushing 8 million people into poverty and setting back poverty reduction efforts by 15 years. But Ukraine's government is still chugging along, doing out social and compensation payments like a boss. The government's goal may seem overly ambitious, but with the help of generous and ongoing Western aid, as well as a sprinkle of good luck, they might just be within reach. Of course, the level of ambition will ultimately hinge on how the conflict unfolds and how quickly and strongly Ukraine's production, consumption and investment bounce back. Let's cross our fingers and hope for the best. The bill for rebuilding and bouncing back in Ukraine has skyrocketed to a whopping $411 billion. It looks like they're going to need a lot of spare change to get back on their feet. In what has turned into the biggest and quickest displacement catastrophe in Europe since World War II, hundreds of millions of people in Ukraine have been forced from their homes and are in desperate need of humanitarian aid. While millions more people are internally displaced in Ukraine and in need of immediate humanitarian aid, about 6 million people have run away as refugees to Europe. Because of the rising violence, the damage of highways and bridges, and the lack of resources and information about safe places to stay, many people are stuck in Ukraine or have no way to flee. For the first time since 2017, the Ukraine conflict has forced the nation into the IRC's emergency watch list. Over 13 million people, or almost a third of Ukraine's pre-war population size, have been evacuated since the conflict began. More than 7 million of them are internally displaced, and around 6.9 million are refugees residing in nearby nations in Europe. Comparatively, the region had up to 4 million refugees during the 1990s Yugoslav wars and about 1 million through the 2015 influx from Africa and the Middle East. In Ukraine, as of June 2023, there have been 15,442 injuries and at least 8,983 civilian deaths. The true numbers are probably far greater. These are simply documented casualties. Since the conflict has been particularly intense, they have been focused in the eastern Donetsk and Luhansk regions, also referred to as the Donbass. As of July 2022, according to US sources, Russian forces had forcefully relocated up to 1.6 million Ukrainian refugees into Russian territory. Many were forced to renounce their Ukrainian nationality, according to rights groups. Russia refers to such activities as humanitarian evacuations, but under international law, forced transfers are crimes against humanity. On top of that, Ukraine's infrastructure has suffered greatly as a result of the conflict. Between February the 24th, 2022 and 2023, the Russian attack on Ukraine was predicted to have caused $50 billion in damage to housing facilities. An additional $36 billion in financial losses were reported due to infrastructure damage. Over that time, it was projected that Ukraine had suffered $135 billion worth of war damage. In fact, due to strikes by Russian aircraft on power plants, residential areas, and healthcare institutions, millions of people are without energy this winter. Although Russian officials contest this, Ukrainian authorities blame them for collapsing the Novokakhovka Dam. The resulting collapse of the dam has caused widespread evacuations, threatening the neighbouring nuclear power station, and left hundreds of thousands of residents with no access to clean drinking water. Millions of people nationwide still only have limited or no access to basic necessities like heat and clean water. Here is another catastrophe. Health officials continue to be worried about the transmission of infectious diseases because of the declining state of the healthcare system. They caution that just 38% of Ukrainians are fully vaccinated against COVID-19, indicating that the disease's rate of spread is still of great importance. Fearing cholera and dysentery, officials in the Russia-occupied city of Mariupol ordered a quarantine. Meanwhile, the UN Human Rights Mission in Ukraine voiced worry over assertions that diseases including hepatitis A and tuberculosis had been acquired by Ukrainian prisoners of war. So things seem to be going from bad to worse in Ukraine. You must be wondering how other countries are responding to such a catastrophe. The EU quickly put into effect its Emergency Temporary Protective Directive, a previously abandoned legislation that grants individuals escaping Ukraine the ability to reside and earn a living in EU member states for a maximum of 3 years without the need to seek asylum. At the moment, 60% of the refugees are officially recognised as Ukrainians, numbering over 4.8 million, under the EU's temporary protection or comparable schemes. Along with up to $19 billion in further economic support in 2023, the EU has also committed to providing Ukraine with over $50 billion in financial, humanitarian and military assistance. While humanitarian and civil society organisations supplied infant supplies and extra clothing, some European nations established hospitals, reception facilities and temporary residences to supply food, information and medical supplies. Others, like Ireland, have exempted Ukraine refugees from needing a visa at all. Experts worry that as the war drags on and Europe struggles with rising energy costs, housing shortages and a lack of work possibilities and tight government finances, there will be an increase in refugee fatigue in the coming year. The situation in Ukraine is really catastrophic. You must be wondering whether there are any actions that should be taken in order to rebuild the economy. But before we go into it, if you liked the video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to our channel. The post-war recovery of Ukraine will be exceptional. The nation is dealing with the terrible fallout from Russian aggression, which exacerbates the issues already facing a developing economy that was formerly socialist. To overcome these obstacles, a significant amount of time, money and effort will be needed. The Ukrainian economy lost 33% of its GDP in the first year following the massive invasion in February 2022. It will take years for the economy to recover from this, which is the biggest decline in activity the nation has seen since gaining independence. Due to the refuge evacuation, Ukraine is expected to have severe labour market shortages long after the war. The nation's attractiveness as an investment destination will be permanently impacted by the war's legacy. The good news is, recovery and economic rebuild are possible in Ukraine. Leaders will need to be creative in solving these issues. The good news is that recovery is possible for Ukraine. Ukraine can change its course and turn setbacks into advantages with the correct preparation. Policymakers in Ukraine should place a strong emphasis on increasing labour productivity and take advantage of the post-conflict period to modernise the state apparatus and economy. Some of these modernisation initiatives include implementing low-carbon production, increasing the economy's energy intensity, and taking advantage of information technology advancements to improve government services. Long story short, the goal is to quickly accomplish all of the structural reforms that other European nations have been undergoing for years. Rebuilding could also mean modernising. Because of high energy intensity, outdated technology, and a lack of funding for development, the majority of Ukraine's major business and industries, which have been negatively impacted by the aggression in one way or another, have gradually lost their competitiveness. From here, economic recovery, so long as it is predicted on a Build Back Better strategy, could speed up Ukraine's modernization, a process that many other nations have been working on for years. For instance, the steel sector in Ukraine has suffered greatly. This includes the closure of Azovstal and Illich Steel, two of its largest operations in Mariupol. However, these businesses were already well behind their European rivals. As per experts, $6.6 billion would need to be invested by Ukrainian businesses in order to implement best available techniques in the industry, which is required in order to quickly adjust to the European market and global ecological needs. If everything else was equal, the Ukrainian industry would need 30 years to adopt the technologies that the EU has been using for the past 15 years. Rebuilding the steel sector following the war could present an opportunity to speed up this catch-up. It's not simply steel that follows this pattern. Generally speaking, modernizing Ukraine might not only help businesses get back up to speed and become more competitive in international markets, but it could also serve as an accelerator for the country's reindustrialization, with an emphasis on increasing labor productivity. Among other things, this will provide a solution to the human resources challenge. Now, what about Russia's reparations payments? As things appear, a number of nations are thinking about using frozen Russian assets to make up for the damages caused by the attack. This includes the EU, which has blocked over $300 billion in assets held by the Russian central bank and an additional $30 billion linked to billionaires close to Vladimir Putin. In addition to making up for Ukraine's losses, cooperation framework ensuring the effective use of these funds would aid in the post-conflict reconstruction of the country's economy. After the war, Ukraine will have an opportunity to address some of the structural issues that have remained unresolved in its 31 years of independence. Should it succeed in doing so, it will not only come out of the war with more strength, but also with increased resilience and economic growth. Policymakers in Ukraine should already be focusing on the prerequisites for reconstruction in order to take advantage of this opportunity. They must first and foremost put up a new institutional structure. Ukraine may learn from its past achievements, especially in terms of its quick and efficient digitalization. Doing business has become simpler and bureaucracy more efficient as a result. Digital solutions also significantly lessen corruption, which has long been considered a significant issue. Second, as a major factor in the country's economic recovery, Ukraine should concentrate on increasing productivity and modernizing production. Besides resolving the labor shortage issue, this will make it easier for Ukraine to integrate more fully into the international economy. Talking about the international economy, we shouldn't forget to talk about the relation of Ukraine with other countries and how the rest of the globe sees this conflict. The restoration of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity is still a top priority for the US. Also, in an effort to penalize Russia for its 2022 attack, Western nations and their allies have increased aid to Ukraine through a number of measures. In fact, the US is Ukraine's main military aid friend. They provided around 67.7 billion euros in aid when financial and humanitarian assistance are considered along with military assistance. Military aid includes cutting-edge military supplies including tanks, drones, helicopters, and missiles and rocket systems. Similar assistance is given by several NATO countries. In the meantime, the scope of the international sanctions against Russia has grown significantly, encompassing a large portion of its energy, financial, defense, and technology sectors. The governments of the US and several European nations also imposed limitations on Russia's access to its enormous foreign reserves, blacklisted Russia's central bank, and prohibited certain Russian banks from participating in the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Along with that, a large number of well-known Western businesses have stopped doing business in Russia. Even though many countries are supporting Ukraine against Russia, this doesn't mean their economies haven't been hardly hit by the conflict. This conflict will hinder growth and drive up costs, dealing serious damage to the world economy. The invasion of Ukraine by Russia has caused pain and a humanitarian disaster, but the impacts of slower development and faster inflation will be felt throughout the entire global economy. In European countries, the damage is already crazy. Sanctions against Russia that have never been seen before would hinder commerce and financial intermediation, ultimately leading to a severe recession there. Increased spending on defense and energy security budgets could put economic strain on European countries as well. For Asian countries, they will be more negatively impacted by Russia's recession and the sanctions. Strong ties between the trade and payment systems will discourage investment, trade, remittances, and tourism, which will have a negative impact on inflation, economic growth, and the external and fiscal accounts of these economies. The Middle East and North African region is no exception. Increased costs for food and energy, along with tighter global financial conditions, are likely to have significant knock-on impacts there. The ASEAN economies also, that import petroleum, India and the frontier economies that include certain Pacific islands will be the ones with a significant impact on current accounts. This might be exacerbated by a decline in travel to countries that depend on Russian visitors. This year, Ukraine has set a lofty military objective: to hold on. This year marks the third year of the nation's full-scale war with Russia. The frontline realities now indicate a year of stagnation, after initial distress at the attack and then high hopes for a speedy turnaround. The military of Ukraine is lacking air defense missiles and artillery ammunition, and its personnel are worn out. Weapons manufactured in the US also haven't yet arrived in large enough quantities. While no one could offer a clear roadmap for 2024, everyone could agree that three principles will govern the course of the upcoming months. First, this spring will be spent managing expectations because Ukraine lacks the resources to set up a major counteroffensive. Second, Russia continues to batter Ukrainian positions with weapon advantage and constant ground attacks thanks to the support of its allies. And third, Kyiv will find it difficult to put up a trustworthy, long-lasting defense in the absence of Western air defense and long-range missiles. The super important factor for Ukraine is its ability to establish favorable defense positions. In the meantime, a lack of shells in Ukraine makes it necessary for its frontline soldiers to ration weaponry and rely on novel tools like drones to discourage Russian attacks. Although progress in increasing local manufacturing has been slow, Kyiv is trying its best. More air defense systems are, as usual, at the very top of the wish list. However, rather than fighter planes or tanks, Kyiv is looking for drones for long-range strikes and monitoring, and then electronic warfare systems that can disrupt Russian ballistic missiles and drones that are focusing on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure and front lines. The army of Ukraine has 800,000 members, plus over 1 million reserves. There has been strong opposition to attempts to boost the number by decreasing the draft age from 27 to 25. Which would add over 400,000 men to the army. But in order to cycle weary soldiers away from the front and create fresh divisions of rested and prepared warriors, Ukraine's military leaders must recruit additional personnel. To sum up, After the war, Ukraine will need to be rebuilt with significant financial assistance from all the world. In the medium to long term, additional support will be required to restore the building blocks of a free and successful nation, rooted in European values, as well as integrated into the European and global economy, as well as to assist it on its European journey. The EU is currently making a significant contribution to bolstering the nation's ongoing resilience. Millions of people have been forced to flee their homes, businesses, social networks, and economic endeavours as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has resulted in horrific civilian fatalities. In order to stop further declines in living standards and poverty in Ukraine, the government must now balance recovery efforts with the nation's pressing needs, which include basic public services like health, education, and social safety. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to receive more content. See you in the next video.